Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the pleasure of working on an older Baymaster reel from Penn. This is the Penn 180. It's obvious that this hasn't been serviced in quite some time because there's a lot of leaked out grease. The handle is loose, this handle is tight. There's grease all over the side plates. There's a misinstalled, we just did a video on this, a misinstalled trip lever. And generally a tight performing reel, which is no surprise if all the grease is out here. Chances are the grease is not inside. So we're going to take this apart, do a light cleaning on it to the best that we can, and we're going to get this thing out fishing again. So I hope you stick around to watch this one. If you have one of these, this service is pretty much going to apply to the 180, the 160, the 155, and the 200. They're all kind of the same reel, just a little bit of a different setup. So we start by removing the parts. There's a little 10 millimeter nut here that you can take off, or 7/16 I believe if you're using the SAEs. And as we take these parts off, I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel and everybody who's a local hometown hero keeping us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated, whether you're in medical, fire, rescue, or essential services, including transportation and food delivery and all the other things that keeps us going despite the coronavirus. So thank you for everything it is that you do. And we really do appreciate your efforts. So I want to clean the parts as I take them off. I remove that handle screw, and that handle screw gives me access to the ability to take the handle off and to unwind the star adjuster. And one of the things about old dried grease is it generally protects the chrome, and this chrome is in pretty good condition. I don't know, this one's very tight to turn. This reel is a late 1950s reel. This one also has a little bit of a bend in the shaft. It's not square. I don't want to mess with that. But maybe with a little bit of luck, some penetrating oil here, just kind of sitting and letting it do its job will work its way onto the shaft and make that a little bit easier to turn. So I'm just going to set that off to the side. Because it's wet, I'm not going to put that into my parts tray. All right, we've got a misinstalled handle. We'll deal with that one in a moment. We just did a video on that recently. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the gear side plate. This is the business end of the reel, and when you're servicing a reel, this is the one that you want to pay attention to because that's where all of the gears are meshing, and that's what makes the reel go round. I take the screws out and I lay them on my table. I know this from past experience that there should be 4 long screws and 2 short screws. The 2 short screws belong in the reel seat. That's what I'm taking out now. If you find the long one in there, somebody probably put the incorrect screw there, and you'll probably find the short one in another post somewhere, or it's quite possible that it fell out at one point and was replaced by a longer screw. All right, we're taking these out, and this is going according to plan. There's 4 long screws and there's 2 short screws. I just want to make sure that they're all there. I also like to just kind of pile them together and just put a little bit of penetrating oil on there. Sometimes when a reel has been sitting like this, it does accumulate some grease and junk, maybe a little bit of corrosion. And if you put that on there, that'll seep out into the threads and that'll help make that go better. This is what you would expect to see inside the reel. This is kind of a traditional Penn setup. And as I mentioned, this setup is really kind of universal with Penn, and a lot of the pieces and parts are actually interchangeable between the Baymaster and the Beachmaster series, as well as the Surfmaster 200 is also in that line. And some of the drag washers are bigger and some of the gears are a little bit different, but the setup itself is pretty much the same. Well, it's not that much you can do with years and years of corrosion on this reel, and all you can do is give it a little bit of a cleaning. I tried to knock some of that off. I did try to use a Flitz cleaner before we started this video. That's why you've got some water in the in here from the rinse. You can tell that that is bone dry in the side plate bearing. So we're going to start by putting some grease in there. And I use a Penn Precision reel grease. It's fishing reel grease, and folks ask me what kind of grease they should use, and I only recommend fishing reel greases. And I really don't care about the manufacturer of that grease. I just care that it is a fishing reel grease. as opposed to anything else that I've seen over time. It really is designed for marine use and has the proper compounds in there to protect against water and corrosion and salt and things like that. So please use a fishing reel grease. Again, I don't care on the brand. I happen to use Penn, not because this is a Penn reel, but because it's a fishing reel. And I use fishing reel greases on fishing reels. Alright, there's 4 screws that hold this bridge together. I just loosen them, and eventually when they're all loose you can push the bridge through. I cup my hand because behind door number 1 over here is an anti-reverse dog, and that anti-reverse dog has a spring on it, and that spring tends to shoot if you don't pay attention. So cupping your hand will show you the kind of assure you that you can catch that spring. If it does, I pointed to the wrong screw, anti-reverse screw. It was actually behind door number 2. Here's that flat spring. Now those are hard to find now, but if you can find any kind of flat piece of metal, you can make that spring. In this case that's reusable, so we're going to just put that right there. I think you can still get those through mysticparts.com if you really need one. I'm going to pull the rest of these screws. Now the side plate screws are threaded and they are partially threaded. And interestingly enough, those 2 that I just pulled out should have been the threaded ones. These go up where the springs are for the yoke. These go below. So that tells me that the last time this reel was serviced, somebody wasn't paying attention there. And here's that fully threaded screw that went through the spring. So why is that important? Well, the spring could get caught in the threads of the screw, and if that's the case, you'll have a real jam. Alright, there's 2 yoke springs. They're going to go in there next. And then we're just going to do a basic cleaning here. I'm going to start by spraying out the interior pieces. I'm going to soak that in a penetrating oil as I grab a piece of 4/0 steel wool. That's a very light buffing steel wool. And just try and take some of the stuff off the trim ring here. You won't get it all, but you'll get some because it's the dried grease. You're never going to restore the pitted chrome without having it re-chromed, and on a reel like this it's not even worth doing. There's far better examples out there that will win beauty contests. You want it clean and you want it mechanically correct. That's about all you can do on a reel this size in this condition. So don't spend a lot of time or money unless it's the first reel you ever bought or something and you want to restore it. Don't bother to spend the money or the time to try and make this look and feel new. You can make it work, and you can make it work very well, but don't worry the pieces and parts looking proper. They won't. You also can't fix UV damage on the side plates, and there's a lot of that with these side plates, so you're just going to have to let it go. I've heard some folks use an auto polish called Mother's Back to Black if you have these black side plates, and they do have some UV damage. There is a process to restore those, which involves some light sanding and some other things, but again, on a reel like this, it's really not worth the effort to do that. Okay, so we have a little bit of dirt on that spool. I'm just going to rub it off. There was a little bit of grease on my non-protected hand. I generally wear a glove to take the grease off, but on my working hand I have problems with that, so I leave it alone. And that's the one, of course, that's got the grease on it. A little bit of grease onto the shaft of the spool. These are Bakelite spools. If there's an advantage to them is they're lightweight, they cast further. If there's a disadvantage to them is they chip and crack and break, and there's nothing really you can do about that. Next up then, we're going to take apart the core of this reel. There's a gear sleeve, a whole bunch of gears, a little piece of that, and I call the other one a ferrule, a gear sleeve. This is your gear sleeve. And usually you can just push that pin through that's holding this to the post. Push it through enough, you can remove that sleeve. If you can't, just use the pliers to pull it out a little bit further. And you can remove that. Now, why do you want to do that? You want to clean this stud because that traps old greases and oils in it and dirt. And every now and then your reel will bog because this got the dirt inside of it and kind of jammed up. You can see on the cotton swab here that there's a lot of dirt that just came out from the center of that. All right, once you do that, then just a quick cleaning of the face of this. This is where the anti-reverse dog is going to ride, so you want to make sure that you get any kind of corrosion or that off. A lot of this is just tarnish, and that's not going to come off easily, but you want to make sure it's smooth. Run your fingers over it because the dog is going to ride in that slot there. All right, I'm going to grab that grease again, light coat of grease onto the shaft. We're going to go ahead and put this back on. And sometimes you can push that in, sometimes you need an assist. Since I pulled it out with the pliers, I was just going to use the pliers to assist me in putting it back in. And when you do that, there'll be a little bit of a bump here, and this has got to clear that ridge. So just make sure that the pin clears the ridge as you do this. Next up was the hard washer. That's going to hold that anti-reverse dog down. And now we have a stack of washers in here, and we'll see if we have to replace these or if they're going to be okay to reuse. They're going to be okay to reuse. These are the original leather washers. They've been around a while. Actually, they're not. They're a hard washer, so they've been replaced. But they haven't been replaced with the Carbon Tex. It's an earlier generation washer, which is okay. We're going to take our main gear. We're going to just kind of run a pick through here because I'm seeing the dried grease in this one as well. Just kind of get anything that looks like it may cause a bump or a rumble in your reeling because it's stuck, and it would kind of be like a speed bump there. If you like, go use a hard brush. It's any of those hard brushes you can find at a dollar store. Nothing fancy. This one was actually a Home Depot one. Just make sure all the teeth are clear and that they're uniform and that you don't see any chips or cracks in them. And then go ahead and put some new grease on there. You don't have to grease everything. The rotation of the gear will cause that to spread over time because they're different size gears. Here's the first of those hard washers that are going to go back on. These are nice clean ones. If they aren't clean, go buff them off. The first one up is a keyed washer. It's got a round exterior and it's got two flat sides to it. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more dry grease onto this. If you don't have dry grease, don't worry. You can go ahead and use regular fishing wheel grease. But these are absorbent washers, so you should put some grease on there. Keep them fresh and keep them from sticking to the other washers. And this one's called the eared washer. It has two tags on it that fit in the slots of that main gear. Make sure that you get them in there as you work on this one. Third one up then. That one has the round washer with the flat side. That's called a keyed washer. That's the last one. So you have two keyed washers and one eared washer. The keyed washers hold the stem or the gear sleeve. The eared washer holds the main gear. And as you put tension on both, the sleeve and the main gear are held together. And that's what causes the reel to hold the fish. Okay. Last one is just a tension washer, then the ferrule goes next on top of that. That is done. We've cleaned up the bridge. We're going to check the pinion gear, and that one's working fine. So what we want to do is use our grease to lubricate the shoulders of the yoke. Put that pinion gear on, and then grease onto the pinion gear. And again, because this is a different diameter than the main gear, it's going to spread the grease around. All right, yoke and pinion gear, jack, bridge assembly, time to reinstall. So if you like this kind of a video, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. And if you subscribe, please hit the notification button. That way you'll see all the videos that I'm posting. And I work on all kinds of reels, so you'll get a good idea of how reels are made, how they come apart, how they get serviced, and how they get put back together again. So if you'll go ahead and do that. The notification button will let you see all the ones I'm doing. So it's just stopped for a moment because I remember that we have this is on backwards. So we're going to go grab a screwdriver. Use the screwdriver that's appropriate for the slot of the screw. Don't go too high or too low on that. And this one just simply needs to be flipped, but you can't do it here. You can see that the stud on the side plate, it goes below the rim, which is where it needs to sit. We just did a video on this one. You want to just pull the lever until you get a balance point, just like that. You'll see it on the inside. The spring will be partially compressed, but it's kind of holding itself in equilibrium. You want to just take that screw out. Flip the lever around. And then reinstall. Now sometimes they're a little bit harder to do. This one was fairly easy. It seemed to want to cooperate. Of course, as soon as I say that, it falls off. But sometimes you're going to find that the balance point is very sensitive, and you're going to have to do it a couple of times. Alright, so we got that back on. We've got that lever resting the way it should now on the side plate. And before I do much more on that side plate, I'm going to use a rod and reel cleaner here to get that dried grease off. This is Penn rod and reel cleaner. Trust me, I'm not sponsored by Penn. I just use the product. I have good success with it. It works, and if it works, I like to tell people about it. And if it doesn't work, I like to tell people it doesn't work too. So that you don't have to necessarily go through the same thing I'm going through in terms of the learning experience. Alright, just buffing some of that old grease off of these pieces. I think we did what we could on those side plates. You can't fix UV damage. You can fix dried grease. That's kind of what we're doing here, just fixing the dried grease. Okay, because that's been sitting wrong, we're just going to put a little drop of oil underneath that eccentric. See if we can make that work a little bit better. Now we're ready for the reinstall. Just make sure that that's functioning properly, which it is. Okay, we're going to put the two yoke springs in next. One goes in each cavity. The yoke and the pinion gear go next. Just like that, push it down. And you can slip the jack over the top of it, just like that. And that's essentially how the jack and the yoke assembly come together. Now we've got our main bridge. You want to do the same thing. You want to push down on this pinion gear, kind of get it out of the way. You're going to install the main gear underneath, and you're going to turn your bridge assembly about perpendicular to where it's going to wind up. You want to get the fully threaded screw through the bottom. You're going to want to take the long flat side of the dog goes up, just like that. And I know it's hard to see on camera, but there is a stud here. Sometimes if you don't have an anti-reverse in the old reels, that stud is broken off. There's no way to repair that. You need to get a new side plate. Here's that spring. Don't worry that it's kind of bent at a 30-degree angle or whatever. It's still going to be fine. That spring goes across the top, under the stud, and rests on the side plate. So I'm hopeful that this is going to show that. This spring is laying on top of the dog. Here's your stud. Goes behind the stud, and it rests on the side plate right there. Once you do that, you turn the rest of the bridge over until you can see that the screw aligns with that bottom hole, and then we can tighten that screw. Now don't tighten it all the way, just a couple turns to make sure that you have it set. The reason for that is that this bridge is temperamental, and if it doesn't go in square, you're going to find the screw doesn't line up properly. So just kind of give them partial turns. Make sure that they're caught, but don't worry too much beyond that. And once you get that last screw in, then you can tighten down everything. So if you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on a reel and you're stuck, or maybe you have a reel and you don't quite know how it's made or where it was made or when it was made or something like that, Leave those questions in the comments section. I'll be happy to answer them if I know the answer to them. If not, I'll try and direct you to the right place to find those answers. Somebody just called me up and asked me where they could get parts for a particular reel. Well, I didn't have those parts. I don't carry a lot of parts, but I knew where you could get them, and so we had that. I'm putting the star adjuster on now to hold everything else in place. It's not a bad idea to turn it, make sure everything's working before you reassemble any further. Particularly with that flat spring, you want to make sure that you have the anti-reverse star working. All right, now it's time to put the piece on. I recommend when you put the piece on that you take the free spool into the off position, pull that pinion gear in, make sure you get a little bit of grease on the stud for the spool, and then come on over here, find a long screw, and go into the crossbars, just like that. There's 4 long screws. I like to do one on each side, preferably the top. I want to keep this as square as I can. And then I put one in the bottom on the reel seat and then kind of rotate again, just to keep the side plate going on square so that I'm sure that I don't damage anything as I'm going to reinstall the reel. As I mentioned, there's 2 short screws, and those go in the bottom. That's so that they don't protrude through that reel seat. If they go through the reel seat, there's a chance that they could catch on the line on the spool and tangle your line. So that's why those are shorter. So finally, if you have a reel that needs to be serviced, you can contact me through the email on the business card that follows. I'll give you repair information. I do everything from basic services right up through a complete rebuild. All of these services, essentially what you see on this video here, it's a complete take-apart cleaning and lube and reassembly. When I service your reel, if it's one that I haven't done a video on, I try to do the video. And if it's one that I've done money on, well, I just shut up and service the reel. Okay, did we do any better? Yeah, we did better. It's kind of floating. Kind of like to see if I can do this with a reel handle. That means that the WD-40 on that knob worked. This one again is a little bit out of skew, but I don't want to risk kind of bending it square because that could just rip the rivet out of it, and if it rips the rivet out of it, the handle isn't good any longer. So I will advise the owner that if he wants to try that, he's welcome to it, but I'm going to leave it as found. Alrighty, we'll just tighten this up. Again, a 10mm works, but I think the 7/16 work. When you're tightening that nut, make sure you got the drag adjuster all the way down. Sometimes if you didn't put it all the way down, what will happen is you'll kind of lock in on that star adjuster and you won't be able to use it. Just taking that last little bit of grease off the top of the thing, and there you go. That's our reel. So this is a Penn 180. It's working beautifully. There you go. Some folks ask about the adjustment on a spool. This one's a little tight. You want to back it off a little bit so that you hear just a small knock in it. That's the proper adjustment for the spool. And then, so that's it. So if you've enjoyed the video, please like it. If you want to see more, again, please subscribe. Please stay safe, stay well. I thank you for watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.